call fads, which means for a day. Come up with something creative and interesting with a lot of pizzazz. But a lot of that's fantasy, and then they write books about their fantasy, which they're not worth the paper they're written on 5 years later. You know. Plus, I think the Bible's plenty interesting itself, and those that make it boring ought to be sued for malpractice. I mean, there's plenty of interesting things in it. I'd like you to turn to the book of Judges. And in looking at biblical responses to life's challenges, I'm skipping a little because I took more time in my last sessions than I planned on. But I don't have this all timed out, really, because I've never done it before. I might never do it again. But what I want to do for biblical responses to life challenges, I want to look at someone else who's emerged against the turbulence of trying times. You know, you heard me to say in our first session that these biblical noteworthies that we know, they arose in precarious times. And we're going to look at one such person today, Gideon. You might be familiar with Gideon's army, but what I want to do is explore the background, and I subtitled this, A Man Who Discovered Himself in a Crisis. Gideon turned out to be quite the winner, but he didn't even know it to begin with. That's really what I'm after. I want to explore that a little because, you know, my thesis is that sometimes when we go and face challenges, we discover things about ourselves that we didn't even know was in us. They're just things that we discover. I want to pick up here in chapter 6, verse 1. You'll see that I've further titled this, When a Warrior Discovered His Long Lost and Buried Warrior Self. And I want to pick on the crisis for a moment, the background, and then I want to look at his initial response to it. And I'm picking up in chapter 6, verse 1, the book of Judges. Then Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, did what was evil in the Lord's eyes. And by the way, the word evil is the word live spelled backwards. Isn't that interesting? And the word devil is the word lived spelled backwards. But the children of Israel did what was evil in the Lord's eyes. So the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. Now, when it said they did evil in the Lord's eyes, that's what's called an anthropomorphic ascription. Anthropomorphic comes from the Greek anthro, which is man, and morphe, which is form. When you say he did evil, or people did evil in the Lord's eyes, God is described as a human being with vision. You know, there's an offering that goes up, and it says, and the Lord smelled the offering, or the Lord saw this. It's kind of, we're giving human characteristics to the divine, but you know, the Bible speaks in poetry. The Lord saw that the children of Israel were doing evil, so he gave them into the hands of Midian. If you look at the Hebrews, they're there in Canaan, but there were different ites, the Midianites being one. And the Midianites kind of traveled. You're looking at the northwestern part of Saudi Arabia, but it's a nomadic group that moved around. And what happens is the children of Israel went in there as agrarians, they're farmers. And I don't want to give a lecture on farming here in northern Indiana, but you're stationary in the land, and you're using the technologies to eke a living out of the real estate that's your own. If you're looking at marauding bands of tribes that are mobile, they don't derive their sustenance from the land per se, because they're not cultivating it. What it is, they're marauders, they're brigands. What they do is they molest others and make off with their goods and their wherewithal. We're told here again in verse 1, the children of Israel did evil, so the Lord gave them into the hand of the Midianites for 7 years. Now you're looking at farmers that for 7 years are being oppressed. Midian maintained an upper hand over Israel, and because of Midian, the children of Israel made themselves hideouts in the mountains, caves, and strongholds. Now, if you're farming, again, I don't want to lecture on farming, you're looking for level spots. But what happens is, we're told in the literature that the Hebrews were intimidated. So they're hiding out in the mountains, caves and strongholds. And we're told in verse 3, whenever Israel had done their sowing, now we're not seamstresses here, we're farmers, they're planting. I'm not disrespecting seamstresses, but whenever they'd done their planting, the Midianites and Amalekites and people from the east would come and raid them. They would set up camp by them, destroy the produce of the land as far as Gaza, and leave nothing in Israel to live on, not a sheep, ox, or donkey. So what it is it's an agrarian culture. They're farming in the valleys. But what happens is they're constantly being harangued by these marauding bands that are coming and seizing their livestock and their assets. And what they don't seize and take for themselves, they burn. The net result then is Israel flees to the mountains with whatever little grain they have or whatever, and they're hiding. Again, in verse 4, they would set up camp by them, destroy the produce of the land, and leave nothing. For they would come up with their cattle, their tents, and invade like a multitude of locusts. Both they and their camels were innumerable, and they would come to the land to ruin it. So Israel was brought very low because of Midian, and the children of Israel cried to the Lord. So there's the background, what in German theologues refer to as the Sitz im Leben, the situation in life, the context. So you're looking at agrarians that are looking to eat out a living, but they're constantly being molested by historical enemies. In verse 7, now it came about when the children of Israel cried to the Lord because of Midian, the Lord sent a prophet to the children of Israel, and he said to them, thus says the Lord, and the God of Israel, it was I who brought you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of bondage, and I delivered you. And then verse 10, then I said to you, I am the Lord. Now, so what happens is these people are crying out because they're disconcerted by their circumstances, because they're constantly getting beat. And the males of the species are reduced, per the text, to hiding in caves in the mountains. They're not even minded to engage the enemy. They're overwhelmed because they're coming with camels and what have you. They're cavalry, in effect. You know, and if you're a stationary infantryman, by the way, we did Veterans Day. Thank you for those who served the country. I never served in the military. I served in police. But I would imagine if you're a lone infantryman out there with a sword and a spear, and you're looking at camels and horses and chariots coming at you, it's like an infantryman with a gun shooting his gun against tanks. It's like shooting a BB gun against tanks. You don't have an answer for it. And it is to say, just qualitatively, these enemies present with more technology, and quantitatively, with the net result, the males of the species are left to hiding. Now, men don't perform well in that environment with fear. There's something in the males of the species. We want to be winners, not losers. We want to be warriors, not worriers. We want to be the head and not the tail. We want to be a victor and not a victim. We want to be a conqueror, not conquered. That's why movies in popular culture that show the story of the guy who comes out of nowhere and wins, whether it's Rocky Balboa and the Rock, or whatever it is, that there's something, it kind of strikes a chord in the males of the species, because we want to be that way by nature. We want to look at ourselves in the mirror and feel good about ourselves. And more importantly, we want our woman to say, that's the man right there. That's what I'm talking about. That we want her to be proud of us. Males, it's interesting, as insensitive as we are, prima facie at face value, we're really cued into how the women see us. So we want to be perceived as a winner. But here, if you look at the literature, it's all a loss. And it's been like this year after year after year. Now we're told in verse, if you look in verse 11, the angel of the Lord came. Now in Hebrew, malach for angel It's the same word for messenger. It comes from a Ugaritic verb, lok, which means to send. So the Lord sends a messenger. We're not glowing in fluorescent colors. We don't have wings. The imagery of angels with wings, I just got into this the other day, it kind of works its way into medieval art. So we're used to glowing angels with wings and what have you. There is one reference in the book of Daniel that speaks of Gabriel flying to make haste to get from here to there. Poetic expression. But we're used to winged creatures. Here we're told an angel of the Lord, a messenger of the Lord, presents and sat under a terebinth that was at Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. We were told earlier that the Hebrews had, that they sowed produce in the valley and then they would gather food staples and they would retreat to the mountains and the caves where they can hide. And there they're kind of, pressing the produce, separating the wheat from the chaff, getting the grape juice out of the grapes. They're kind of processing it secretively so as not to be seen. The background for this is fear. And the background for this, it's been this way 7 years. So you're looking at a culture that's kind of enculturated into fear, lack of success. The Lord shows up, and there's this person, Midian. Then we're told, and this is the verse that I wanted to get to as my first stopping point, really. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." So what happens, the Lord shows up, and here's Gideon. All that we've known about him to date is that he, like everybody else, is afraid of what's going on. And he doesn't have an answer for it, so he's taking care of his business, hiding and eking out a miserable existence. And the Lord shows up and says to him, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." Now, that's an interesting expression, "O man of valor." I mean, to me, it would make more sense if Gideon's there rallying the troops. Hey, let's go down there and attack him in the valley. That's not what he's doing. I don't think Gideon was a man of valor. It's not like I want to, well, God says he's a man of valor. Siph says he wasn't. I guess we'll go with Siph. But there's nothing in this to say that. But what you do find is Gideon's response. "O man of valor, the Lord is with you." Gideon said to him at verse 13, "O my Lord, if the Lord is with us, then why has all this befallen us? So where are all his wonders that our fathers told us about, saying, 'Didn't the Lord bring you up out of the land of Egypt?'" So he says, "Oh, man of valor." And this man's response is, "Excuse me? God is with you, O man of valor." He says, "What do you mean? First of all, what do you mean God is with us?" Yeah, there's some stories about yesteryear, God saving us from the Egyptians. But that wasn't his experience. He's enculturated into a world where everything has been going wrong. He's gotten used to it. There's nothing in him that betrays him being any sort of an alpha male. So according to the literature, when the Lord shows up, "The Lord is with you, O man of valor," first he says, "What do you mean the Lord is with?" Maybe you haven't read the newspapers. But if God is with us, friends like him, who needs enemies? If this is what the world looks like when he's showing up, who needs them? The ancients kind of figured it out. They all had their gods. And what happens if the Hebrews went to war against the Amalekites? The Amalekites called on their gods. The Hebrews called on their God. They fought. Whoever won obviously had the stronger God. That's the way they perceived. Even the expression, the Lord of hosts, that you hear the expression, the Lord of hosts. In Isaiah earlier, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tziva'ot, the Lord of the hosts. doesn't mean the Lord of the hospitality ministry. Not that I'm disrespecting hospitality ministry. It's the Lord of the brigades, the Lord of the platoons. It's the Lord of the armies. You know, and David in the Psalms cries, Lord, where are you? You don't go out with our armies anymore. David in the Psalm says, with my God, I can crush a troop. He trains my hands to bend the bow of bronze. You know, I mean, you have this kind of energy that exudes from him. And he says that the Lord is the one who's responsible, that you look for your God to give you success. If you look at Psalm 137, when the Hebrews have been bested in battle and taken off in slave stock, he says, by the willows of Babylon, we hung up our lyres. How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? Our captors are requiring a song saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. You know, when your armies have been defeated and you're taken off as slave stock, whoosh, let's hear that song again. Jehovah Jireh, my provider, his grace is sufficient. Whoosh, sing it louder. I mean, that's, you know, it doesn't work. You know, it just doesn't work. So what happens is the Lord shows up, you know, in a season for years that's characterized by defeat, by powerlessness, by financial deprivation, by humiliation. Shows up to this guy, hey, the Lord is with you, O man of valor. And so Gideon says, what do you mean with us? If this is what it looks like when he's with us, never mind when he's abandoned us. He even says in verse 13, the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian. That was his perspective. Maybe yesteryear God was with us, but listen, Angel, you got to read the newspapers. The times, to quote Bob Dylan, are changing. You know, the seasons have changed. But if you look in verse 14, then the Lord turned toward him and said, go in this might of yours and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent you? Now, earlier he called him a man of valor. And here he says, now listen, go in this might of yours and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. Now, it seems to me that this personality that's speaking to Gideon sees something in Gideon that Gideon doesn't even see himself. That he's addressing him not with respect to what he really is. Because Gideon is a coward. Gideon is a worrier. Gideon is a defeated, broken man in a defeated, broken culture. That's what Gideon was. Now, the personality that's speaking to him, he addresses him on a completely different basis. And eventually, what happens is Gideon starts to believe it. There's certain signs. Well, first Gideon is sheepish. Well, look, God, if you're really with me here, I want you to do this, and give me a sign. Make it the ground dew here, but dry there. He's a farmer. He's used to waking up in the morning and there's dew in the ground, but he kind of plays with it a little. He's not really ready to jump in. But finally, as you follow the narrative, what happens is his confidence starts to build. And as I'd mentioned in the first session, the word confidence is the Latin confides, which means with faith. And to me, few things in life are as pathetic as a male who lacks confidence. Now, I get it. I was scared to death, to tell you the truth. When I'm looking at Barry, here's this woman that I married that's way above my pay grade. And hey, would you like to go out? What happens is that, when a male does that, he's exposing himself to risk. She could say no. And sometimes for fear of being rejected, you just shut up. And you don't, for me, I think the males of the species are better if they act upon their impulses and just see what happens, instead of living internally, quietly, just forever spinning around things in their brain. To me, it's tragic. There's the woman that he never married, the job he never got. There's the innovation that he never followed up on. And you just kind of live in this twilight zone. Well, there was something in this guy. And eventually, he kind of gets going. He needs some signs and what have you. And then as you follow in the literature, he will come up with unique strategies, and he will bring about great successes. There's a Hebrew expression, Nesh Gadol Hoyashem, a great miracle happened there. That different miracles are at work. Look at this beautiful church here. Years ago, it was in a storefront somewhere. And then there were challenges between now and then. What would it be if someone didn't try? If someone didn't just believe God that there is a future, even if nobody else believes? Where would it be? Where would Columbus have been if he didn't believe there was maybe some land on the other end of the horizon when his crew was ready to mutiny on him? It takes something in there to forge ahead. And what happens is eventually Gideon's engines get fired, and he becomes the principal deliverer. If you look in chapter 8, verse 28, we're told, and here I'm looking at crisis. The crisis in chapter 6, 1 and on, is the intimidation, the being bested by your enemies. The aftermath, then, what happens after Gideon jumps into the fray? We're told in verse 28, Midian was subdued before the children of Israel, and they lifted up their heads no more. The land had tranquility for 40 years in the days of Gideon. Now, by the way, Gideon didn't just do that by himself. What happens is Gideon gets some spring in his step, some confidence, and then it starts to wake up the other men around him, who, like him previously, were kind of enculturated into, subjection to intimidation. And what happens is he becomes a live wire, a spark. And that's what happens. You can look at a dispirited team, a football team, let's say. They go into halftime, it's a train wreck, but someone gets the message and goes out there, and it only takes a spark to get the fire burning. What happens is it just takes someone, even if you're down 21 points, it just takes someone to say, listen, we can pull this rabbit out of the hat. We're better than this. And there's just something about the kind of energy that they transmit, instead of just being sullen and defeated. Well, it says here in the literature, Midian was subdued before the children of Israel. What happens is there was this intractable enemy that had been getting the better of them for years. And I didn't cultivate the entire story. I just wanted to note the genesis of the story was the beginning place where the Lord showed up to this man and said, "O man of valor." And he's like, "Excuse me? You must have me confused for something else." No, Gideon. Go in this might of yours. Might me where? Who? Now, all this to say, when I think of the challenges of the day or the crises, maybe we've got a lot more going for us than we realize. Now, there's a way that I can say, there's a way that I can speak at 70, which wouldn't have been appropriate at 27, 37, 47, 57. But there's a way that you can speak in a way that's kind of grandfatherly. The guy that introduced me this morning, Chuck Moore, said, "This is the smartest guy I've ever met." Well, thank you. Thank you. The smartest guy he ever met flunked out of high school. The smartest guy that he ever met tried to get into Bible college at 27 at the Moody Bible Institute, and they wouldn't accept him initially. Because when you want to get into a college, colleges have a habit of wanting to see your high school transcripts. And everything was a D and an F. Everything. They put me in the special program at high school where you just put the losers so that way they don't get stuck in the system. You just want to kind of blow them through. And even then, I couldn't really perform well because I was high every day of my life. And how can you pass tests if A, you don't read the books, B, you're never in class, and C, when you look at the test, you're so stoned the letters keep moving around on the pages. It's just not a recipe for success. So I get out of high school. I was a janitor. There's nothing wrong with being a janitor. But I was scrubbing carpets, and I had gotten my life together with the Lord, and I was at a church service in the back, and someone was speaking, kind of like I'm talking now, with an open Bible, and I heard a voice, "Go do that." So I spoke to my pastor friend. I really feel maybe the Lord wants me to go into ministry. What do I need to do? Well, you need to go to Bible college. Oh, no, I don't. I fought against it. I have the Holy Spirit. I don't need all that stuff. You know, Lord, shut up, Syph. Do it. Okay, so I apply to Bible college, and I get rejected. Here's a Jew that's accepted Jesus that wants to go to Bible college as a Christian, and the school says no. So I spoke to my pastor. What should I do? He says, go back and beg. Okay, so what I do is I go back. I don't know if you remember the TV show Saturday Night Live. They'd have a personality there called Church Lady. Yeah. This registrar was like Church Lady on Saturday Night Live. And so what happened is I just went back and begged. So they said, okay, we'll put you in on academic probation. Okay. Everybody's got to begin somewhere. You know, the journey of a lifetime begins with the first steps. Now, so, by the way, I didn't bring any. I've written a number of books in my lifetime. Even the Bible that I'm speaking from. This was published by Baker Books, a prestigious evangelical publishing house. If you read the introduction to it, I wrote it because I was the project manager for it. I've written a number of books, never mind a Bible. Okay? Now, I'm in Bible college on academic probation. And I remember the first paper I wrote. So I hand in the paper to the professor, and I get it back. And he must have gone through 2 big pens with red ink as he marked up that 10-page paper. There was red ink all over the place. I thought it was pretty good when I put it in there, but when I got it back, I could tell he wasn't altogether impressed. So what happens is I'm going through it, and I see red ink everywhere, correcting this and that and this. Then finally, I get to the last page, and at the bottom, there were 2 letters, F and B. Now, this was before Facebook, okay? Because I'm a dinosaur. I'm 70, okay? We're talking 27. So I go up to the professor, and I say, excuse me, Prof, you know, I wanted to talk to you about my paper. I have 1 or 2 questions about it. I go, okay. I says, well, you know, I got the impression that you weren't overly impressed by it. You know, he says, Syph, listen, you know, the typos and this and that and this and that. He says, here's my question, doctor. What's that? I said, at the back, there were 2 letters. There's an F and a B. Now, to tell you the truth, I'm used to F. I kind of got that one figured out. I've seen 1 or 2 Fs in my lifetime, but I've never seen F and B. Can you tell me what that's all about? He says, yeah. He says, Jeffrey, this is a college paper. And the F, Jeffrey, this is a mess for a college paper. Spelling's horrible. I mean, there weren't computers back then. If there were, maybe NASA had them and the CIA, but I didn't. And I knew there were dictionaries back then, but I just didn't think to use them. And I just kind of spelt things the way they sounded to me, And I've been out of school for a while at 27. And even when I was in school, I wasn't really in school. So I just kind of spelled it, look, whatever. So he says, Jeffrey, look, the spelling is wrong, the syntax is wrong, the grammar, it's a mess. And that F is because as a college paper, this is an F. I said, okay, well, I got that. What's the B? He said, that's the grade I'm giving you. I said, why is that? He said, because I can see what you're trying to say. That he saw someone in there that hadn't developed the skills yet to present proper, but there's a kind of mind at work there that has potential. And so I remember that grace. I never thought that guy would just keep on going, would wind up getting an associate degree in divinity, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree in theology, and then a doctorate in ministry and theology. I never saw that coming. I never thought I was a professor. I never saw me being a professor in me. Never saw it. But someone else saw something. I remember, and he said, okay, well, that's spiritual, Jeffrey, but here's the deal. I don't live in that spiritual world. I live in a material, secular world. I mean, what can you tell me about God in that space? I'll give you an example. I don't just live in church. I wanted to become a police officer. Now, I remember when I wanted to become a police officer. If you want to become a police officer, there's like a 35, 40-page application you have to fill out. Every job you've had, every credit card you've had, every boyfriend, girlfriend, etc. There's a page there, and it lists every drug. And it lists it. You have to circle if you've used that drug, and then there's a line next to it to note how many times you used it. Now, I remember when I was superintending police academies. At the first, I would do intake, but then I had 3 lieutenants, and I farmed it off for them to do it. But I would have these applicants present to me with their paperwork, and I'd say, look, do you know what the unpardonable sin is in the church? Sometimes they'd know, sometimes they wouldn't. Someone would say, well, I think it's blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. Yeah, that's right. If you're in the police academy, you can blaspheme all you want. You know what the unpardonable sin is here? What's that? You can't lie to me. I'm not trying to make light of blasphemy, but I'm saying there's no room for deceit. No, I knew that. So I have this application in front of me, and I'm sitting in this room and haven't quite filled it out yet, but I call over a Lieutenant Nero and Sergeant Smith, both of whom went on to become police chiefs eventually. And I said, can I ask you a question, guys? Yeah, what's that, Syfe? I said, you see this piece of paper here? I said, there's nothing on this paper that I haven't smoked, snorted, popped in my mouth, or shot in my veins. And if you want to know how many times I did it, does anybody have a calculator? That is not what you would expect for someone that's going to become a police officer. That would be an automatic exclusion in no uncertain terms. Now, what Lieutenant Nero said, he said, we know you, Syfe. I had helped the department for a couple years as a chaplain. I said, I did this stuff when I was a teenager, young and dumb. But I want to be honest. But here I am now, many years have passed. And Nero said, Jeff, we know you're not that man anymore. In fact, the fact that you have that experience will make you a better police officer. Now, I never thought I had it in me, actually. There's plenty of reasons why I could have been intimidated out of even trying to become a police officer. Never mind someone who just went to the police academy but took a route where it was reserved. I just donated for 10, 12 years and then worked part-time, and then I got pushed into being a sergeant. I wound up getting the rank and title of commander, and then I fell backwards into running police academies. I never saw any of that coming. So when this guy reads this story from the lens of his own experience, when I hear the Lord saying to Gideon, "Oh, man of valor, you can win," and when I hear, or when I think I see Gideon doing the old calculation, impossible, 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 I kind of relate to it. There's a sense in which I process it through my own systems. And when I think of the story of crisis and response, I think, and I have no way of knowing what challenges might confront you, depending on where you are in life. Maybe you're facing a bill. Maybe you're facing the inability to pay them. Maybe it's health, wealth. Who knows? I don't know. I just know that stuff happens. And I know it's possible for us to be intimidated and kind of cower because of a problem that seems intractable. But when I look at the literature here, when I look at the story, and certainly when I process it through my understanding of the cross, my understanding of Jesus Christ, I can't help but think that there's possibilities that we have, that we can confront the challenges of the day. And I think it's not only a message that we need to know ourselves, but I think it's a message that we need to transmit to others too. Because Gideon didn't win any battles by himself, but the kind of confidence he had was contagious. You ever heard of the word influence? And the word influence and the word flu, as in catching the flu, are cut from the same cloth. Someone catch the flu, there's a little something that just spreads unbeknownst to you. What's true of the flu is also true of influence. You know, there's a way that faith telegraphs. You can do this. You know, there's a kind of can do. But here's the thing that Gideon did that I would just commend to you, but I don't know, I'll ask you anything you want to discuss about this, and then we'll kind of move on. That when I look at the way we're built as human beings, I, as a police officer, had to learn to use firearms, a variety of firearms, whether it's a shotgun, whether it's an assault rifle, whether it's a handgun. I started with a Beretta, went to a SIG, and then issued a Glock. I never fired a handgun before I went to the academy. You would think I had Parkinson's disease when I went through the training at first. So, I mean, I was kind of trained in using lethal force, and then I was also trained in using intermediate weapons. It can be a baton, it can be a taser, it can be OC spray. For intermediate weapons, not only was I trained in lethal force and intermediate weapons, you're trained in using your hands. The question is, what does it take to get compliance? When you're facing challenges, whether you're using a hand, whether you're going to an intermediate method, or whether you're using lethal force, here's one of the things that I learned. You can't defeat anything unless you're willing to face it. That just the way that we're designed as human beings, you can't win anything. Maybe a donkey can get something off from behind, but we're not donkeys. And there's just something. And it's even scary sometimes. Just, you know, Barry and I was married for 30 years. My first wife went on to be with the Lord. We've been married for 10. There have been occasions when Barry has seen me pivot immediately and go to a problem. It's often scary, because I'll run to it aggressively. When I know when I realize that the gig is up, I got to move. I move. And I think, by the way, I'll just close and open it for discussion. I think that's, by the way, why one of the reasons, the way I understand, you might recall Jesus said, he who loves his life will lose it. He who loses his life for my name's sake will find it. And I use this as an analogy. Figure a soldier. You know, you're there in the field and you're taking fire. And there's the soldier who's, you know, hiding behind a rock. Oh God, no. Fire. You know, or hiding behind a tree or something. You're afraid of the moment and you're just clinging on to life that, oh my God, life might leave me any minute. Oh my God, I can get hurt. It's death waiting to happen. What happens is if you try and cling, in the midst of the turbulence of trying times, if you try and cling on to what little scrap of security you think you might have proximate to you, that might not be a recipe for success. What you want to have your faith, you want to have your wits, you want to look forward, you want to maneuver, you want to move. You'll find energies and strategies to help you get the better of the moment, rather than just be paralyzed in fear, hoping the bad things stop. I think Gideon learned that lesson. And if I'm afforded the opportunity to talk about challenges, about facing challenges, I think that Gideon's story is the one worth telling, and those are some points worth mentioning. Any thoughts when you look at the story, when you think of the Gideon crisis, when you think about what happened, when you think about any learning moments from that story or any ways to apply it? You know, I've kind of given mine. Yes, sir. I think that was very well said. If I have a heart attack, you can stand up and finish my talk. That was brilliant, quite frankly. And that was absolutely brilliant. That's where I land on that. And by the way, I don't think it's accidental that when Jesus found people, he changed their name. Look at this guy named Peter. Jesus named him that. He named him Rock. Rock? I mean, Peter was so unstable. He was a loon. In fact, by the way, when I look in the New Testament, if I'm a businessman, I'm going to go away and going to put my company in charge of someone. If I'm Jesus Christ and I'm leaving and I got to find one of these 12 to really keep the shop going in my absence, if I were just to look at resumes, there's one guy who would stand out as the best kitty in the litter. Talented, responsible, sharp. I would have picked him to lead the church. His name was Judas Iscariot. I mean, he had so many things to commend business-wise and what have you, and Jesus seemed to trust him. If I look at the guy, if I would have had 12 applications, Judas definitely would have been there, one that I would have picked. But, you know, it's amazing God does one or two things without getting my permission, or he does it his way, not mine. But if I was looking at 12 disciples and I wanted to get rid of 6, you know, sometimes if you have a lot of, you got to get rid of those that you know aren't going to make it. Peter would have been dropped in the first cut. If I had 12 applications, I would have gotten rid of him in the first 6. Peter, for God's sake, Jesus, I'll never deny you. Right, cock-a-doodle-doo. I mean, he was nowhere to be found half the time. That old boy, he was so flaky, so flaky. But what does the big guy call him? Rock. Obviously, he saw something that no one else did. That was very insightful. Anybody else? Well, we can take a break or do another sampling here. What's your pleasure, Pastor?
I need to take a break. Just speaking for me.
Okay, well, listen, hey, listen. When you're the boss, okay, go take a leak. We get it. I want to look at one more example from the Old Testament and then from the New. And, what I'm doing, of course, is talking about facing challenges. You've heard me to say we do well to not run from them. I see challenging times over and again in biblical literature, and certain people rise against the backdrop of those troubled times. Interestingly, by the way, in Japanese, the same word for crisis is the same word for opportunity. That, crises become opportunities for things. And they birth innovation. But one can't be intimidated. I'll just tell you anecdotally, I remember before I married Barry, I went to her mother to get permission. I'm kind of old school. Well, at 70, I'm old everything. But I married her when I was 60. Everything's old. And Barry was 62. And she was never married, so I'm kind of old school. I went to her mother. I wanted to get permission. So I go to her mother. And her mother says, "So why should I give you permission to marry my daughter?" And I said, "Well, how old's your daughter?" She said, 62. I said, "How many men has she brought home?" She said, "None." I said, "Take what you can get." Take what you can get. I'll give you 2 reasons. What's that? Number 1, I have a job. Number 2, I'm healthy. She said, "Take her, so you should have." People get intimidated. And I want to show you one more example of someone who was born in troubled times when everyone was intimidated. They were bogged down in an intractable situation. Never mind 7 years. Try 7 times 70 and counting. You're looking at the story of Moses. And what I'd like you to do is go with me to the book of Exodus, in Hebrew, Shemot. And what I'm interested in is just principally looking at some characteristics of the man before the message. You heard me to say already that in the case of Gideon, it seems to me that he was a warrior and he really didn't even know it. I think there are certain things about ourselves we discover when we step out we wouldn't otherwise know it. I remember, by the way, when I was a freshman in Bible college, I was afforded the opportunity to teach Sunday school. And I remember how excited I was. My goodness, all week I'm studying and preparing. There was just something about opening a Bible that made me come alive. And when I finished the Sunday school, for the whole next week, I'm really into it. There was something about it. And I remember before I finished getting a bachelor's degree in theology, I had my first ministry job. I had an apartment. And I remember the first thing I did is I got bookshelves to put them up. And what I wanted to do was I put a desk there and I put up these bookshelves in this little one-room apartment. And I was so proud to put up a certificate there and these books. And there was just something about teaching and studying. There was just something about it that resonated with me. I never saw a professor in all that. But I did notice that whenever I open up a Bible, there's a certain kind of energy that I feel that wasn't there in other endeavors. Well, I want you to look in chapter, in the book of Exodus. Now, from the first chapter, we're told that the Hebrews were, who had initially come into Mitzrayim, into Egypt, on a friendly basis. If Joseph was invited in, his family was invited in, and they settled. The book of Genesis comes to a close with 70 or 75 Hebrews. They weren't called Jews, Hebrews, moving into the land of Egypt. The word Hebrew, comes from a word meaning beyond the river, because Abram came from Ur of Chaldee. He crossed the Euphrates and made his way into Eretz Canaan, the land of Canaan. He went on a journey, a leap of faith. And his descendants, Hebrews, they're not called Jews, Hebrews. 70, 75 of them move into Egypt. Genesis comes to a close. When Exodus opens, you have over 2 million. Time has changed. They've been in there for many years, many, many years. The political situation is deteriorated. They're put to the whip. And the way that we number the population, if you look at the book of Numbers, in the Pentateuch, in the 5 books of Moses, the book of Numbers, in the Hebrew, it's called Bamidbar, in the wilderness. There's a census taken of fighting men at the beginning of the book and then at the end of the book. At the beginning of the wilderness journey and then at the end. And when you add up the number of soldiers of fighting age, you're looking a little over 600,000 at the beginning. Now, if you figure 600,000 males of fighting age, you can figure there's a certain percentage of those that are too young to bear arms and too old to bear arms. And similarly, there's women that are young, that age and beyond. You can extrapolate from a male population of 600,000 plus warriors and figure a community of about 2 million put to the whip. There's this woman in chapter 2 who gives birth to a son. And against the backdrop of an edict that all the males should be killed. But rather than do that, she takes her boy and puts him in a basket on the river and lets him float down. She figures, well, I can't take care of him, maybe someone will. And the basket floats into an area where there's a woman there who's of the royal household. And you know how girls are. I don't want to claim that I know how girls are, but you do. And you know, okay, who cares whether it's a Jew or not? Girls and babies, they just kind of, oh my God, look at the cute little baby. And so this little baby floats in there in a basket. Who cares where he's from? She's a teenager. That's a baby. Bingo. Pay dirt. Oh, can I take him home? Please, Daddy. Please, please. What happens is Moses, because his mother, rather than settle for the status quo of the day, she rolls the dice against the vagaries of the future. She just takes a chance, rolls the dice, builds a basket, sticks him in it. And because she takes that leap of faith, the child winds up floating into a little enclave where this girl was. And the baby winds up getting not only adopted into the royal family, but once you have a baby, you need a wet nurse. And Moses' big sister is following along on the shore to see what will happen with the basket. So Moses' you know how big sisters are. Big sisters are like part-time moms. Sometimes they're not even part-time, they're full-time. I know, because in my family, I'm the only boy, everyone else was a girl. I had more moms than I know what to do with. So what happens is so the baby's floating down the river and it goes in an area and there's this girl, Miriam, big sister, teenager. Hey, you need someone to nurse the kid. I know someone that can do it. So what happens is, because of Miriam's chutzpah, because of her willingness to take, what happens is Moses' mother gets a job. She gets paid to wet nurse the baby. So we've gone from killing the babies, now she's making a living feeding it. But what happens is, her taking care of the child precipitates a crisis. On the one hand, she's hired in to be a nanny for this boy who has been adopted into the royal house of Egypt. But Moses is going to learn firsthand from his mother, though he's adopted as an Egyptian and enjoys all the pomp and privilege of the royal house, he belongs to the slave stock on the other side of the tracks. And it precipitates a kind of identity crisis. I bet you his mother, you know how moms are. Oh, God's got a plan for your life, and you bring forth the baby to be dedicated. I know maybe this isn't the second coming of Christ, but maybe this is Elijah. There's a sense, moms and kids. But listen, I bet when Moses' mother was breastfeeding that baby and raising him, she's saying, Mo, I bet God's got a plan for your life. I bet there's something really special in all of this. Well, who knows what Moses' mom tells him? All that I know is we encounter a tortured Moses initially. We're told in chapter 2, verse 11. Now we're looking at a grown Moses now, 40 years. Maybe Moses' mother said, Mo, God's got a great plan for your life, but ain't nothing happened, and he's 40. In verse 11, now it happened in those days, after Moses had grown up, that he went out to his brothers and saw their burdens. He noticed an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. So he looked around, and we saw that there was nobody. He killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Well, that's a great strategy. Got to appreciate that. There's 2 million, there's 2 million Hebrews. Let's say 100,000 taskmasters. If you kill one a day, let's see, that's 365 a year. There you go, Mo. That's a strategy, all right. Just kill them one at a time. That'll fix it. That's going to solve that problem. I mean, I think personally, Moses doesn't have a strategy here. He just snaps. What we know from the literature says that he saw the burden of his own people. He actually looked at it. He kind of skirted around it and knew it. But all of a sudden, in the literature, he's just transfixed. Those are my people. And there was something that bothered him about that. That there was something that this man didn't like, people hurting other people, molesting other people. He didn't like that. He had a social conscience. And he noticed, and he kills him. And he hides him in the sand. In verse 13, then the following day, he saw 2 Hebrew men fighting. So he said to the guilty one, why are you beating your companion? Now, this guy didn't like people who hurt people. There was something about this man. He was something of a genteel spirit. There's a lot of people that don't care. A lot of people don't care. Now, listen, I can drive down the road, and if I see a squirrel or an animal on the road, you know what I'm going to do? I'll typically turn around and go run over it again. The reason why I'll do it is I don't want it to suffer. I don't know if it's dead or not. There's something about me. I don't like creatures to suffer. I don't like to hurt people. I don't like animals to suffer. I'm a cat daddy, by the way. Barry, I was a dog guy, but then, Barry brought cats, so I'm a cat daddy now. I forget how Pastor Chuck said it. I don't love him, but what was the word he used? Fancier. He's a fancier. No, but he's not emotionally attached, but he fancies them. I'm emotionally attached. Yeah, I get down on all fours. One of them has nothing to do with me. The other, we're tight. We're tight. Now Barry, the only living creature she wants in her bed is me. But, sometimes I'll get up in the middle of the night and go to another bedroom, leave the door open, and me and Hodu, we're just close. She's a Maine Coon cat. Her name is Hodu. I love her dearly. I mean, for me, I don't like hurting creatures. By the way, I might be stepping on toes here, that in the Jewish world, Oh, this is where, you ready for the blood to leave your face? I survived one possible mishap. I don't know if I'll get out of this one alive. Hold on, let me pray. Jesus' name. Speak in tongues. Is there a baptismal here? I want to jump in and jump out. So, okay. In the Jewish world, you're not allowed to hunt for pleasure. You're allowed to hunt for pleasure, but you have to eat it. Do you eat?
So you're not allowed?
You're allowed to hunt if you eat it. Do you eat it?
That's my philosophy as well.
Okay, good. Thank you, Jesus. There is a God in heaven. Thank Lord.
Yeah, I don't hunt with like racks.
Right. In the Jewish world, let's say there's little Bambi out there. In the Jewish world, you're allowed to hunt if you eat, but there's no variance from it. Remember, if you look in the Ten Commandments, in Exodus chapter 20, there's the various commandments, and commandment number 5 is honor your father and mother. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery. It's just boom, boom. But when you get to honor your father and mother, it says that your days might be prolonged upon. God rambles. Sorry. You know, honor your father and mother, that your days may be prolonged upon the earth and God may prosper you. He's rambling. There's one other time when he does it. There's a story in Deuteronomy where a man is walking through the woods and he sees a branch that's snapped on the ground. And there's a bird nest in the tree. And there is a mother bird on top of the nest, and there's eggs there, or chicks, you know. And you're walking through the woods and you see the eggs there, and or the chicks, you're thinking, Egg McMuffin. Yes, McDonald's, McDavid's, Jewish. McDavid's, chicken nuggets. Okay, you look there and it flash, you're hungry. Chicken nuggets. Yeah. In the Torah, it says, you're not allowed to approach the nest if the mother bird is there. It says you have to shoo the mother bird away if you're going to take the eggs or the chicks. The point is the mother bird is a sentient being. She shouldn't have to see her children being seized. Okay, there's the parental bond is so sacred. He says, if you see the mother bird there, shoo the mother bird. You cannot take those eggs. Make sure you do it this way that your days might be prolonged upon the earth. In other words, honor your father and mother. The bond between a mother and a child is so sacred, it even applies to the animal kingdom. You with me on that? And now, by the way, if you're raised to respect animals, now little boys can be cruel. There's a spider, pull the legs out. If you're raised to be kind toward animals, then you will be the more so inclined to be inclined toward other human beings. Conversely, if you're not, I remember a briefing as a police officer where, we're brought in, and it's not at all uncommon for the sergeant to speak to the troops before he sends us out for our shift. And there were 2 documents there he wanted us to read. And one was a study done of inmates that were doing hard times in prison for crimes against persons. And a study was done, and they found that in all of their cases, they abused animals when they were younger. And the other was a document about if you're responding to a disturbance on the threat of, let's say, it's a possible abuse or neglect of a child. And if you go to that home and you see animals that are abused or neglected, here's what you need to know. There's 100% correlation between those that abuse animals and those that abuse humans. That honor your father and mother, respecting life. It's even respecting the animal kingdom. And the reason why he says honor your father and mother, that your days might be prolonged upon the earth, if someone can't marshal the energies to respect their own parents, then how are they going to grow up from the home and, respect a school teacher, respect a police officer, respect an employer, respect a spouse? I've often said, let's say if, I have a son and there's a girl you like, she invites you over to the home, and there's the dog sitting on the couch, but she wants to show off, and she just goes and kicks the dog. Get out of here. Sit down, Johnny. I told my boys, look, if you want that thing to be the mother of your children, good luck. I don't care if she's really hot and her daddy's filthy rich. She's got no other kids and it's all coming to you. You're going to pay dearly if you hop in bed with that. You don't want a woman who's not kind to animals. In any case, I didn't plan on getting into all that stuff, but I didn't get in trouble with Chuck. I was a little nervous there, with the hunting thing. And, I guess it's the tension that's relieving itself that I kind of go on a tangent. Now, back to the notes. What's that?
I just repeating you the tension that's relieving itself.
Yeah, that's right. The tension's relieving now. And my wife says, Jeffrey, if you'll just stick with the notes that I wrote out for you, you'll do fine. She says, Jeff, but when you divert and when you go off on your own and they sense your strange personality, I can't help you then. So I'll just go right back to the notes that my wife wrote out for me. Same thing with you, right?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So if you'll go to chapter 2 of Exodus, here's Moses. He sees this Egyptian beating a Hebrew. He kills the Egyptian. The next day, we're told he sees a Hebrew hitting another Hebrew. Hey, guys, what are you doing? Never mind what those Hebrews are doing. What's Moses doing? He's attesting there's something about him that doesn't like injustice. He doesn't like hurting people. So what does he do? Eventually, Moses realized that the Hebrew's going to say, what, you're going to kill me like you did the Egyptian? Moses realizes, oh my God, the word is out. I got to get out of here. So hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more, no more. What happens is Moses leaves. We're told in chapter 2, in verse 15, Moses fled and settled in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. The priest of Midian had 7 daughters who came and drew water. They filled the troughs to water their father's flock, but shepherds came and drove them away. So Moses stood up, helped them, and watered their flock. Now think of this for a second. So Moses is there. He's a stranger. And he's running for his life, running from the police. He's running. And so what happens, he sees a little oasis area, some trees. He goes there, and he sees these girls coming. Guys know when girls are coming. Come on, let's talk. See these girls coming. So he's just there hiding behind the palm tree or whatever. And these girls are kind of like shepherd girls. They got sheep, and they're taking care of the sheep. And so Moses sees that. Then he sees some boys come, some shepherd boys. And the shepherd boys are pushy to the girls. Hey, get out of here. We're going to get the water. Now, you figure if this troughs of water, it's not like they have a spigot. You just turn it, and the water comes out. It's coming out a bucket at a time. The girls did all the hard work, so you have all this water that's already out there. And what happens, these boys show up, and are shooing the girls away. You with me so far? Now, Moses doesn't know the girls, and he doesn't know the boys. He doesn't know. But Moses knows that's no way for boys to treat girls. That's what he knows. So Moses stands up. He's got his staff. He swings it around. Probably looked a little weird. The girls are saying, who's the strange guy in town with the weird Egyptian haircut? So he beats up one or two. They flee. Those boys flee. So what happens is the girls, we're told in the literature, they water their flocks, and then they go home. And their dad says, hey, Ann, you're home a little early. Oh, yeah, well, there was this guy with the strange Egyptian haircut. And we were there by the well, and, these guys came, the Hatfields, we're the McCoys, the Hatfield boys came. And we're making life difficult, and this guy showed up. And Dad says, well, hey, did you get their name? Did you get his name? No. Can you look him up on Facebook? Can you text him? Anything? No. But the girls found out, and he winds up getting invited over for dinner. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes little baby Moses in the baby carriage. Now, what do we know about this man? He has a sensitive conscience. Moses doesn't like people hurting people. That's what we know about him. I kind of look at him as a police officer, to tell you the truth. He's out there working the streets. He's got a little assault happening over here, a little assault happening over there, and he's willing to jump into it. And he's not willing to jump into it because he's assigned to jump into it. The reason why he's jumping into it is he doesn't like injustice. That's what we know about the man. That's what we can discover about him. Now, it's not surprising later on then that this would be the man that God's going to work through to bring the great revelation of justice in the Hebrew Bible. In the Hebrew Bible, by the way, Jews don't talk about monotheism in the Old Testament, the belief in one God. Jews talk about ethical monotheism, because it doesn't just tell a story about how to believe in God, it tells about how to deal with other people ethically, justly. There's ethics in the literature. It's not just us and our relationship with God in like the vertical axis. It's horizontal, how we treat others. That just reverberates so much through the literature. Now, it's not surprising if you look at this man right now, he's just a man who's running for his life. Oh, he had pay dirt. He married beautiful. He married a shepherd girl. That's not exactly moving to Beverly Hills. He's landing somewhere. But who's to say that he's going to be great? If you look in chapter 3, what happens, eventually Moses' life is interrupted. 40 years later, he's 80 years of age. This was a guy that had a sensitive heart. He didn't like injustice. But, Moses' life didn't work out well. He snapped out in Egypt. He lost a good job. He had a nice Rolex watch. He had a Lexus chariot, thoroughbred. He had some nice silk stuff happening and everything, but he screwed that up, messed that thing up big time. He just snaps out, kills an Egyptian. And the Egyptians are saying, look, we took him in, did everything for him, and look how he treats us, those Jews, those Hebrews. He says, I messed up everything there. So there was a guy who maybe dreamed big. Oh, Mommy said, I know God's got super plans for you. Moses' problem was he believed it, and it never happened. He snaps. And then, so what happens is he goes and he runs away into the wilderness for 40 years. He's 80 years old. No great dream ever happened for him. If you look at in chapter 3, Moses is tending a flock, and something supernatural happens. We're told in verse 2, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame. God will do something supernatural, not necessarily in church. He's just out there living his life, and all of a sudden he sees an anomaly. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire within a bush. So he looked and he saw the bush burning with fire, but it was not consumed. I would have looked too. I'm an old fireman. I know a little bit about fire. That's what I'm talking about. Except it wasn't what I was talking about. I realized I love fire. I just don't like oxygen. Anyway, that's another whole other story. But I like breathing my own air. But the point is he sees something. He's out in the wilderness for 40 years, and he's been there all over the place in that wilderness, and he sees something he ain't never seen before. God gets his attention. Kind of does a double take. Got his attention. Poor Barry, that's what happened to her. She got me attention. She got my attention. That's what I'm talking about now. That poor thing. It's a poor thing. I remember back when I was a cop, I'd say, look, if I get in a fight, if I get into a gunfight, you better shoot me in the head. Because if I get shot in the right arm, I'll pick up the gun with my left. If I get shot in the left, I'm going to keep on fighting. I'm just that pushy. You got it right in the head, then I'm done. But once I get something, anyway, I don't know how I got into all that. It has nothing to do with my message, but I'm just looking at my wife and remembering, I guess. Anyway, so what happens is that he sees this flame thing happening, and all of a sudden a voice from the flame, Moses. All of a sudden God's talking to him through a flame. God uses something, an anomaly, something supernatural. Moses. If you look in verse 7, the Lord said, I have seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their slave masters, and I know their pains. And Moses says, so what? So I've come down to deliver them. Moses says, then God says, well, Mo, how about you? You want to get a little new job? Sheep thing isn't working out. How about you being my man? Moses says, no. Moses says, hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no mo, no mo, no mo, no mo. He doesn't want it. God says, look, I've seen these Egyptians. It's a mess. Moses doesn't want to know from nothing. Moses, I've sent you. Oh, they're not going to listen to me. I'll give you the words. Oh, they're not going to. What happens is there's a string of objections. And you know why Moses finally decided to go? God says, okay, look, no more Mr. Nice Guy. If you don't go, I'm going to kill you. Moses says, okay, I'll get a bus to Cairo in the morning. We're in. It's interesting. Moses was sensitive to the plight of the Hebrew people. And he's snapping out. But then it doesn't work. His life gets mixed up. He's thrown into a crisis. The dream never materialized. He's just running around the wilderness for 40 years. And then the Lord shows up and says, go lead my people out of Egypt. I've seen their pain. Moses doesn't want to have anything to do with it. He doesn't want the dream stuff anymore. But finally, God pushes him to go because he had a sensitive side to him. He just lost sight of it. He just lost sight of it. Life didn't work out the way he thought it should. And I want to stress, didn't work out the way it should in his mind. Now, what happened is Moses eventually is going to go back to Egypt. And he's going to lead the people out of Egypt through the wilderness for 40 years. Those people had never been in that wilderness. Moses spent 40 years there before he ever went and fetched them. He knew every watering hole, every rock, everything. There's a sense in which, from Moses' perspective, the world fell apart. I really screwed this thing up. The dream never came true. Mom said I was going to be a great redeemer. Snap, kill Egyptian, pushed out. Oh, forget all that stuff. In his mind, it never worked out. But the truth of the matter is, God used that. God didn't just use the fact that Moses had a tender heart. He even used his stupid, his snap out, his lack of strategy. So what happens is when Moses finally returns to Egypt and goes to Paro Melech Mitzrayim, Pharaoh the king of Egypt, let my people go. God is with him. We got signs and wonders. We have a great story. Well, Moses is a man born for troubled times, and the crisis was in Exodus chapter 1 through 3. I unpacked that some. If you look at the aftermath, if you go to Deuteronomy, the very end, this is the last thing that's said about Moses, and this won't take me long to preach or teach or call this whatever you will. If you look in Deuteronomy chapter 34, there's like a testament to Moses' life, 120 years old. I mean, when you look in chapter 3, verse 1, where Moses is at 80, fast forward through his life, his ministry, his giving the Torah, the law, his bringing biblical justice to the world through his sensitive heart. This man who's sheepish. I don't want this ministry. I don't want this. I'm tired of all this. Well, yes, he really did. If you look, it says of him, not at 80, which is what he was then, at 120. If you look in verse 7, Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye was not dim, nor was his natural force abated. He still had vigor. He still had that eye of the tiger. If you can recall the Rocky series, Rocky Balboa, Rocky's going through the motions, but it says, look, you lost the eye of the tiger. You don't have that killer instinct. You know, I am 70 years old, but I ain't dead yet. Amen. I fully intend to rage against the dying of the light. I'm one tough old bird. I'm still in school. I'm in the gym all the time. I'm raging against the darkness and the dying of the light. There's a sense, in fact, even I'm going to be in such good shape when I die. You know, Jews, when they die, we don't have an open casket. It's closed. And I'm born and raised Jewish. I want to keep the tradition. So I plan to have the closed casket, plexiglass. Plexiglass. I'm going to be so buff. And I'm going to make arrangements. You get me a suit. I want it a little tight. A little tight. I'm going to be there, and you paint a smile on my face. I don't care what I look like when I die. Just rearrange the muscles. Do something. I'm going to be buff, and people are going to walk by. They're going to see 9 years old. Dang, that's what I'm talking about. I fully intend to go defiant. You know, if you look at this man, if you're at 120 years old, and you have internal to you a little punchiness, something going for you, it means something's probably gone right in your life that enables you to have that kind of unction about you. And I think the reason why Moses has that is you look at the beginning of his life, there was a problem. It was a big problem. God had a plan. And this man attached himself to that plan, and his life had purpose. And as he worked at that purpose, he had progress. And at the end of his life, here he is. The children of Israel, they're not in Egypt anymore. They're right on the east, ready to enter into Canaan proper. And he knew that his life had something to do with this. Listen, I think all of us have the option to work at a great endeavor when we participate in the Jesus story of making his will and ways known on planet Earth. I think all of us, not everybody has to be the pastor. All of us, on a football team, not everybody's the quarterback, not everybody's a running back, but everybody has a part to play in working together to advance this great drama. I hope that as a result of our time together that we're minded to be encouraged that crisis presents opportunity. Crisis isn't something that we walk away from, either in our own lives or other people's lives. What it is we see a crisis and we go to it. I want to close by looking at a verse in Philippians. I'm working on a commentary in Philippians, and Barry this morning says, what a guy. We were waking up, and there I was at the desk kind of working on this. She says, oh, my, you always like a woman who's proud of her man. And I was in the Word. I want you to look in Philippians chapter 2, and I'm going to look at verses 6 through 11. It sounds like a long message, 5 minutes at the most, I promise you. This author, Paul, by the way, is writing from a prison. He has spent years in prison. He was unfairly arrested in Judea. He then was interred in Caesarea Maritime for 2 years, unfairly, by Felix and Festus, governors there that didn't want to give him a redress for his grievance. He's then carted off to Rome as a prisoner to stand trial, and he goes through an arduous journey that's characterized by shipwreck. And there he is then in Rome, and Philippians is one of 4 letters that he writes. And the Philippian correspondence is exceedingly optimistic. which you wouldn't expect for a man who's been through what he's through. I remember as a firefighter, there's an accident. This man was thrown from his car, and he's there in the intersection. I go and get a little blanket and put it under his head. And what's your name? Harry Cohen. I put the pillow under there. I says, Mr. Cohen, are you comfortable? He looks at me and goes, yeah, I make a good living. Okay, it's a joke. It's a joke. Are you comfortable? I do okay. The point is, you wouldn't expect a man in that situation to make a joke. And you wouldn't expect, Paul, who's just been through the meat grinder, and he's still in it. It's not like he's coming out the other end and he's got the victory. He's still there. It's interesting, but he's unstoppable. He's unflappable. And he's thinking about others. So he writes this letter, and he talks about Jesus in verse 6. Well, in verse 5, he says, have this attitude which we have in Christ Jesus, who though he was in the form of God, did not consider being equal to God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself, took on the form of a servant, and was found in the likeness of men. In verse 8, and he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on the cross. That is so scandalous. The Romans would think, what's self-respecting God but actually one become a man? Not only becoming a man, but to die the death of the most marginalized. In fact, if you're hurting right now, well, how's it, what's the pain on a scale of 1 to 10? Oh, doc, it's 10. This is really excruciating. The word excruciating comes from the Latin excrucius, which means from the cross. If you look at Jesus' execution on the cross, the Romans weren't looking to kill him. The Romans knew how to kill someone, and it's over. They wanted to take his life as slowly and painfully and publicly as possible. So that way, as he's screaming away on a cross, he's a billboard on the highway. Don't mess with Rome or this can happen to you. That's not just killing someone, that's something else. And to think that God would do that made no sense. But here, this author, Paul, who himself is going through some things that are a little disconcerting and unpleasant, he thinks of Jesus, who had it all gone for him, and he left it in order to be a service to you mankind. In verse 9 he says, and for this reason God highly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name. What you find just in the examples that we looked at, whether it's Gideon, whether it's Moses, whoever, these Old Testament figures, there was a problem and they ran to it. They wanted to solve it. I think, and you heard me to say this at the beginning, and I want to stress at the end, what I want to commend to you is that all of us are first responders. We're a little army of paramedics, firemen, police officers. When we see stuff that's problematic, we want to just go try and fix it. Not just complain. Well, the problem with her is this. I remember when Hurricane Katrina hit a couple years ago. People were saying, well, the reason why New Orleans was hit with this hurricane was because there's a bunch of queers in New Orleans. Mardi Gras. They're getting the punishment that they deserve. That's why God sent the hurricane. Remember, they came to Jesus in John chapter 9 and said, who sinned, this man or his father, that he was born blind? Jesus said, never mind. This is an opportunity for the gift of God to work, and Jesus healed him. It was just an opportunity for God to get glory by caring about this human being. Instead of blaming, well, the problem with this person is that, the problem is that, and you're this and you're that. I personally think it's better to light candles than it is to curse the darkness. We're just here to help people. We're paramedics. If I'm a medical doctor, someone comes to me with HIV, look, you queer. I'm just trying to help. Can I pray for you, man? Let's see if we can get the better of this thing. Let people experience the love of God. Maybe they haven't had any love. Maybe that's why he became gay in the first place. Didn't have a man who loved him in his home. Who knows? I'm not God. I don't know where someone's been before they get to me. But here, Jesus, what he does is there's challenges, and he goes for it. And for that reason, in verse 9, God highly exalted him and gave him the name above every name. There's examples in the Bible of these people that went for service. They got elevated. Moses, Gideon, David, different people. I didn't get into David. I wanted to. And he gave him the name that is above every name. The name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth, and every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Thank you so much for affording me the opportunity to come and talk to you about crisis and response. What I wanted to do was note that there are crises in life. You might recall at the beginning of this talk, I looked at crises in life. I used art. I was interested in Thomas Cole to note how all human beings go through crises. And then I looked at the developmental life cycle to note that there are all sorts of problems that happen at all these predictable moments. But then principally what I wanted to do is look at biblical literature, not just impress you that I know something about art or developmental psychology. What I want to do is look at biblical literature, and I see a challenge in this literature. I see that we're all challenged to be EMTs, police officers, paramedics, everything, to get out there. And there's challenges in this world. We have challenges. God can take care of our business. Other people have challenges. Let's try and take care of their business. Because the Bible says a liberal man will be enriched, and he who waters will himself be watered. In Jeremiah, we're told, pray for the city I've sent you into exile, for by seeking their welfare, you'll find your welfare. At the end of the day, by caring about others, we find a life. There are examples in biblical literature of women and men who decided to jump into the game, love God, love others, and they discover themselves in the process. May the Lord bless the ministry of the word. Pastor.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hallelujah. Enjoy? Yes. Well, tomorrow, church, Dr. Sykes is turning you loose again. So it's going to be a party. An entrance, casual. Casual. Hey, and don't celebrate too much. I know where you live.
Hey, what do you mean casual? I'm going to wear my dress jeans.
I'm wearing jeans.
I bought my dress. I might even tie my hair back. Don't get excited.